to a world-class facility. But what I've seen over the last 5 to 10 years is a huge rise in demand across rural mid-Norfolk, and the data produced by the House of Commons Library shows that SEN, special education needs, now 18% of all pupils have serious special education needs. We are providing support to 1.2 million of the 1.7. So there are 500,000 children around this country who are not getting the support they need. And I would like to suggest that quite a lot of them are in the east and quite a lot of them are in rural areas, because rural areas face a particular challenge, as one or two colleagues have mentioned. During the election, every day I did a school gate, every month I do a heads forum. Scarning School, Dereham, Toffwood School, Yaxham School, I think just about all my schools have been reporting an increasing surge causing chaos. Parents having to stop work, hugely difficult legal processes, the EHCP system broken. And when I talk to teachers, they also highlight to me that something in the last few years, we've seen a huge surge in demand through the pandemic, through rural poverty because of the cost of living crisis, which has hit us hard, through diets, and I know the government's made some announcements about children's diets, and the wider challenge of mental health. And I want to highlight particularly the rural aspect of this. I'm sure that at the heart of it, part of the problem is that the formula is not properly compensating for rural costs, or the way that the cost of living crisis has particularly hit rural families. And I really ask the Minister, and I know she's nodding and she understands this, that in that review she puts the needs of rural SEN at the heart of the work that she's doing.
Thank you. I call Jen Craft.
Thank you to the Honourable Member for Lowestoft for securing this important debate. Mr. Chair, the SEND system is in chaos. It is broken. I am the parent of a disabled child myself, and I've seen firsthand how 14 years of chronic underfunding, understaffing, a lack of political will to understand the level of need, coupled with stigmatising parents of SEND children, when we fight for the education that our children deserve, I've seen the damage and the chaos that it has wrought. How do we fix the system? How do we go back to getting what our children need? I believe that a system that works for SEND children is an education system that works for all of our children. Educational needs and disability should not be seen as parallel to the education system. It should be absolutely central to it. If we get it right for our children, we get it right for every child. And secondly, an SEND system that is built around the lived experience of parents and carers and comes at it from a perspective that a parent or a carer would take is one that has absolute success built in. I do not see my child's journey through education in stages. I do not see early years, primary school, secondary school, further education and beyond as separate. My child's journey is a lifelong one. Similarly, I do not look at the services that she requires in silos, and neither do any parents of an SEND child. To fix the system, we need to come at it from the basis of what does the child need from the moment they enter their education system, whether that is in a preschool setting, a nursery setting, through to the moment when they leave. How have we created a successful individual able to go into the world and achieve their full potential? At the moment, there are so many parents who find themselves at a complete loss and desperation with the chaos of the system. They have to be all things to their child, and they never get a chance to just be mum or dad. They have to be speech and language therapist, an advocate, a physiotherapist. They have to be an educational psychologist, arguing for an education, health and care support plan that quite often is absolutely impossible to obtain. Our system needs an awful lot of work doing to it. We need to begin this journey, and we need to look at how we can properly deliver for children, not just in our region, the east of England, and not in the respective individual constituencies that we have here, but across the country.
Thanks. I call Rupert Lowe.
Thank you to Jess Asato, my neighbouring MP for Lowestoft, for hosting this important debate. The issue of SEND provision in the East is pertinent, particularly in my constituency, Great Yarmouth. I do wish to put on record, however, my concern on the issue of over-diagnosis relating to mental disorders. The rush to label any energetic or active child with a condition is not helpful. This is not to downplay the impact on the many, many children who suffer from a range of challenging issues and needs, but there is a debate to be had around what actually constitutes a mental disorder and how many children are affected. In March 21, the number of under 18s seen by mental health services in the last 12 months was 572,912. In July 24, that number stood at 797,238. Are children becoming unhappier, more mentally ill, or is there an issue with overdiagnosis? Lockdown played a brutal role, stripping millions of young people of what they love, forcing them in front of televisions and smartphones for months on end. Habits for many have not changed and will not change. Is it a surprise that so many are now suffering? I'm a huge believer in the importance of physical activity in tackling mental health issues, getting children active, getting them outdoors, and getting them competitive, developing social and emotional and physical skills. Sensible public investment is required, building pools, parks and pitches in order to give children the platform they need to get physically active. I fully agree that for many the facilities are simply not there. I would like to commend a range of clubs in my constituency that are doing such wonderful work for young children, many of whom have had the pleasure of visiting, such as Hopton Harriers and, of course, Great Yarmouth Town FC. This activity should be encouraged and, more importantly, funded so that children have the opportunity to get more active in their communities. This, of course, is not suitable for all, but for many it can and will help. On SEND provision, I would like to directly question the Labour members here today on this. What effect will the removal of VAT exemption on private schools have on access to proper support for SEND children in the east of England? A cruel move that will force thousands of students into a state system which is already buckling under the pressure from uncontrolled mass immigration. Schools are literally crumbling away, yet your callous policy will publish hard-working families who simply want the best for their children. The British private school system, unlike the NHS, is genuinely the envy of the world. We should be encouraging it and fostering it rather than punitively attacking such a British success story. I will.
I believe the member appears to be conflating another issue with what we're talking about today. We all already know that you have an ECP plan. VAT will not be affected in those situations. Does the member not accept that?
That is your subjective opinion. I accept that. So, in my view, it's the politics of envy, pure and simple. This particularly distasteful tweet from the Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, sums up the Labour Party's disdain for hard-working, aspirational parents. Our state schools need
Can I say to
more...
the member, can you sit down a second?
I haven't quite finished, Sir Mark.
Well, I'm just interrupting you. You don't refer to other members of this House by their name. You either refer to their constituency or their position. And actually, you've taken nearly 4 minutes now. This is taking time away from others. Could you bring your remarks to a close?
I will stop there.
Okay. Next speaker, Sam Carling.
Thank you very much, Mark. It's a pleasure to have you in the chair today. Pupils with special educational needs and disabilities make up well over 1 in 10 of all pupils, and that number is growing. In the East, there are nearly 34,000 children with complex disabilities. Most of these pupils are in mainstream schools, and they need support in mainstream schools. One of the greatest frustrations I have with the constant discussions from members opposite around our policy on VAT in private schools is that the majority of children with SEND are not in private schools. They are in mainstream schools. That is where the support is needed. It is not fair in any way to expect parents to send children to a private school and pay all of the fees associated with that because that child has a special educational need or disability. It's completely unacceptable. As the Honourable Member for Lowestoft was mentioning earlier, in our region there's a particular problem with education, health and care plans not being issued within the statutory guideline. Nationally, it's around 50% are. Our region, it is much lower, so we have a particular regional issue there. Demand for support is currently outstripping supply. And because of that, many children with special educational needs and disabilities have been forced to leave school altogether. In a SEND debate in March, the issue of non-elective home education was highlighted, where parents feel they have no choice but to take their children out of school to meet their needs.
Friend give way.
I will.
Thank you for my honourable friend giving way. The report that was issued last December for SEND provision in Scarborough and Whitby will chime with other members. A 40% increase in the number of requests for EHCPs compared with the previous year, and an increase of nearly 30% in the number of suspensions. Charities like Closer Communities in Scarborough are now supporting families who are looking after children whose needs are not being met in school. Would my honourable friend agree with me that as we go forward, we mustn't simply pay lip service to these charities, but actively include them as we make plans to improve provision? Thank you.
I thank my honourable friend for that intervention, and I absolutely agree with her. I'm about to mention a charity in my own constituency that's doing really amazing work in this space that's encountering some difficulties as well, and we do need to support them. I was speaking about non-elective home education, and the Education Select Committee has for years criticised the lack of clarity on the numbers of parents taking their children out of school for that reason, or indeed the lack of clarity on the number of home-educated children overall. I therefore welcome the Children's Wellbeing Bill announced in a King's Speech, which includes provisions to require local authorities to set up and maintain children not in school registers, because knowing the scale of the challenge we face there will be critical to addressing it and allowing us to provide much needed support for parents. Family Voice Peterborough, a charity in my constituency who seek to improve services for young people with disabilities, are having particular problems because it's not just the crisis within the sector that's having issues, but the crisis around the economy and such like, that's worsening it in many ways. They're having problems with their energy bills, for example. They used to pay about $8,000 before the pandemic. It's now about $40,000. So their work's being impacted by the damage there. And the needs of these charities are so important for understanding the needs of local areas. Family Voice have revealed concerning SEND trends in Peterborough, which is where I represent a large part of, with increased strain on the system and a more difficult experience for parent carers. Children with SEND have the right, as all children do, to an education provided by the state. That right has been gutted by previous governments, but we will clean up the mess that's been made and restore certainty and trust in SEND provision to make education accessible for all.
Okay, thank you. Nick Timothy.
Thank you, Sir Mark, and I also congratulate the member for Lowestoft for securing this debate. I don't want to repeat everything that everybody's said so far, but by and large I think the debate has been held in a constructive spirit, and I associate myself with the constructive suggestions made by most of the members of the debate. We all know in our constituencies examples where the provision of special educational needs works. There's examples from my constituency, small primary schools with specialist provision within a mainstream setting, such as Exning Primary School, and specialist schools such as Churchill School in Haverhill, which is excellent, and which I welcomed to Parliament just before the conference recess. But we also obviously all meet a lot of constituents who are suffering the agony and the anxiety caused by difficulties in terms of screening, assessment, and planning for their children when they are in need. And I associate myself with the comments from my honourable friend, right honourable friend, I think, who explained that actually in rural and semi-rural settings, the challenge is that much greater because of issues such as difficulties with the rural transport network. We all know that provision across the country and actually in the east of England has not been good enough for some time. We can all talk about some of the reasons why there is a growing demand for special educational needs, but we know that the response needs to improve. I know that before the Ofsted and CQC report into the provision of services in Suffolk, there was already an improvement plan in place for Suffolk, but I know now there is an SEND improvement board, a new strategy and a commitment of £4.4 million for SEND services for the year ahead by Suffolk County Council. But we do need to be better nationally as well as locally with screening, assessments, with the problems that various honourable members have already listed with EHCPs. So what I really wanted to say to the Minister today was, if the government and the education team come forward with constructive proposals to improve those things, and in particular the problems with EHCPs, I'm sure she will receive a constructive and positive response from certainly myself, but colleagues in my party on our side of the House.
Thank you. I call Jack Abbott.
Thank you so much, and I would like to thank my honourable friend, the Member of Parliament for Lowestoft, for securing this very important debate, one that's very close to my heart. Chair, while the SEND crisis is a national one, and we will hear and have heard devastating testimonies from colleagues across our region today, hundreds, if not thousands, of families across Suffolk have been failed because of this deep-rooted, unrelenting failure, one that is not only structural but cultural too. And this is not new. Chair, I have campaigned alongside families and campaign groups for many, many years, battling to get them the support that they need. And I can tell you there is rarely anything as heartbreaking as a parent breaking down in tears as they beg you for help for their young child, exhausted and broken by a system that works against them rather than for them. And in Suffolk, we have seen the same cycle over and over again. And a damning report, and we've seen multiple versions now, and I'll just say gently to the Honourable Member for West Suffolk, this wasn't the first Ofsted CQC report we've had in Suffolk. This is the third in less than a decade. The same war words then follow, the same hollow promises of change and improvements, yet little change ever does come. The lived experiences of families across our county have not improved, and in many cases they have worsened. And as I highlighted in my maiden speech, 5 years ago, after yet another damning report on SEND provision in Suffolk, the one before last, our local newspaper, the East Anglian Daily Times, carried a hauntingly memorable front page. Faces of children and families from across Suffolk so badly let down by a failed system was accompanied by the headline, "We must be heard." A simple plea, yet one that has gone unanswered time and again. Chair, there's many examples I could use to highlight the SEND crisis in SEND provision in Suffolk, but in the short time I have, I just wish to focus on school exclusions. Now, it's absolutely right that the new Secretary of State for Education, Bridget Phillipson, has made driving up school attendance a priority. If a child is not in school, they cannot learn. But this is the point, Chair. For many children with SEND, our education system far too often fails to meet their needs, and in the worst situations and cases, they're removed from it entirely. And over the summer, the latest school exclusion figures for English schools for the school year 2022-23 was released by the Department for Education. And once again, these figures showed an increasingly familiar and therefore increasingly alarming trend across the east of England, but in particular Suffolk. And in our county this year, all but one primary school permanent exclusion was handed to children with special educational needs. In Suffolk, state-funded primary schools, fixed-term exclusions were 30 times more likely...
Thank you. I thank my honourable friend for giving way. And just to reflect what he has said on the amount of school exclusions for SEND pupils, and to state that quite a lot of parents often feel pressured into off-rolling their children, that is removing them from the education system in a way so as not to have what is known as a permanent exclusion on their record, a permanent record which in fact does not exist, has never existed in this country, is a work of fiction. But a number of parents feel that they have no option other than to remove their children from the education system so that they don't face further penalties for having absent children while they are at school.
I thank my honourable friend for Thurrock, and she's absolutely right. The statistics I'm reading here are almost just on the surface. We know there are many, many more families who've had to make the difficult decision to homeschool their children, not out of choice, but out of necessity, and because they feel they have no other option. And just to finish the point about the school exclusions that we do know about, fixed-term exclusions were 30 times more likely to go to a child with SEND and an EHE plan than to a child without. I should add that our county's fixed-term exclusions are, once again, some of the highest in the country, an unwanted and shameful record of inaction and indifference. And across all age groups in Suffolk, permanent exclusions are more than 6 times as likely, and fixed-term exclusions more than 5 times as likely to go to a child with SEND. But to return to the right point, Chair, while I am encouraged by the intention of the new government with respect to SEND provision, I would join members here and so many others to reiterate that the challenge is enormous and must not be underestimated. I know, and families in Ipswich know, there is no overnight fix for years of failure. But what they do expect is a clear, credible plan with measurable, defined goals with regards to SEND provision. and not the half-baked, half-hearted SEND review that was finally dished up after much delay by the previous government. They expect government
order. We're
I'm coming
running
to
short
an
of
end.
time.
I'm coming to an end. They expect government to work with local authorities to put this into place, particularly with authorities like Suffolk County Council. Now, it falls to us as part of this new Labour government to follow through on our promise to do so, working with local authorities and families to make urgent progress. Children who need
Can
our
you take
help
your seat,
simply
please?
cannot wait.
Thanks. Can I remind members that when they refer to members of this House, they refer to their constituency, member of whatever constituency, or their position. They don't name members of Parliament. Could I call Bayo Alaba?
Thank you, Sir Mark, for allowing me to speak today. I'd also like to thank Jess Sato for arranging this debate. It's great to see so many MPs from the East of England here to discuss such an important issue. It's an issue which has come up time and time again during my time as a youth mentor, as a school governor, and also as a behavioural mentor as well. And particularly, my honourable friend just referenced the attendance at schools and the issues around punctuality. It's something that I know sort of close to heart because I also chair a disciplinary board for a local school as well. Now, firstly, I'd also like to pay tribute to Raw Learning. I had the pleasure to attend the launch event of Raw Learning's event at Forest School last week. It was my second time. The first time I didn't take shoes, so I recommend that all members, if they visit Forest Schools, to bring a pair of wellies. It's also a fantastic service for our young people who are not able to conform to traditional learning environments, transforming young people's lives and their families. Families should not have to wait over a year to receive an educational health care plan. In South and East and Rochford, my constituency, and nationally, we have seen a huge increase in the demand for EHCs. It is up to our local authorities to administer the EHC plans, and by law, the process is supposed to take a maximum of 20 weeks. However, in South and East and Rochford, 90.4% of the decisions took 6 months or longer. So often it is the children who are most in need left out of school whilst they wait. There are so many factors which can exacerbate these issues, such as catchment areas, incomes, and social capital. It is my absolute honour to represent my constituency in Rochford, in Parliament, to debate SEND in the East of England. and to be part of Labour's mission-driven government. I welcome the inclusion will be at the SEND policy moving forward. Does the honourable friend agree more needs to be done to support families, parents and organisations like Raw Learning, which so often fill the gap where local authorities are stretched? Mainstream schools don't have the resources to sufficiently support children with SEN in the classroom, and where the previous government has failed. Thank you.
Thank you. Because of the length of time taken from speakers who have already spoken, we're now down to 2 minutes per remaining member. Mohammed Yassin.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, Sir Mark. I'm pleased to say the provision for children in special education needs in Bedford-Camston has improved greatly since 2018 following an Ofsted and CQC inspection, which then found significant areas of weaknesses in the local area's practice. Next month, the brand new River Tree Free School in Camston for 200 children aged 2 to 19 with special education needs will be completed, with transitions for students to start in January. It's taken a few years, and it has been a very frustrating wait for parents and children who are desperate to take up their place. But I really hope this will improve and provide the right environment for all the children to thrive. But there is more to be done. Families tell me they can't access the health and mental health services they need. Most parents struggle for years to be heard and to get a diagnosis for their child. Securing an education, health and care plan is difficult and sometimes exhausting. We can trace the cuts to funding for all these services back to Tory austerity and will take time to recover. To train and recruit the educational psychologists, speech and language therapists and other educational specialists to help the most vulnerable children access to support they need. But I remain concerned about the waits for EHC plans, especially when the number of children with the SEN diagnosis is rising, and is the discrepancy between having a diagnosis and having an EHC plan in place. Sadly, all across the country, far too many children with a disability are still not having their needs met. I stop here because of the time limit. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I call Peter Prinsley.
Thank you, Sir Mark, and thank you to my honourable friend from Lowestoft for arranging this debate. So despite the fact that councils lose about 98% of tribunal cases, there seems to be no real consequences of their failures to act in the first place. Families are left to navigate a tribunal system which is overwhelmed, delaying the help their children desperately need. There seems to be a failure of accountability. My constituents are frustrated and tired of fighting a system which should be working for them. The time has come for stronger enforcement mechanisms. Local authorities must surely face penalties for failures, particularly when they fall short of their legal duties. The public demands some change. My constituent Thomas Howard led a petition signed by over 16,000 people calling for mandatory neurodiversity training in universities. This shows the breadth of concern about the lack of support across all levels of education, from primary schools to universities. The call for accountability is not just about individual cases, it's about making the system work for everyone. So this debate is an opportunity for us to push for real change in the East of England. With stronger accountability, we will continue, without stronger accountability, we'll continue to let down children and families we're meant to serve. We must ensure that local authorities are not only meeting their obligations, but are in some way held responsible when they fail to do so. Thank you.
Okay, I call Terry Jeremy.
Thank you very much, Sir Mark, and I'm grateful to my honourable friend from Lowestoft for giving us all the opportunity to talk about this important issue. I've been a county councillor in Norfolk for the past 11 years. During that time, I've helped many families with SEND cases, but nothing could have prepared me for the avalanche of SEND-related casework in my new role as the Member of Parliament for South West Norfolk. There is an obvious impact on children and their families, and that's been ably covered by colleagues today. But I wanted to highlight the impact on family finances, jobs, and the wider economy. It has struck me that nearly every single family attending one of my surgeries with a SEND case has one or both parents having been forced to give up work to care for their child. Most recently, at my Downer Market surgery, a serving member of our armed forces told me how he had to take a pay cut as he was now undeployable, forced to work from home and care for his child, as I'm sure we would all do so. There are many similar cases. Lost income, lost jobs. We must recognise the impact on children and on families, but also on family finances and the wider economy. SEND cases are detailed and they are complex, and unlike the member for Great Yarmouth, I do not have the skills and the qualifications to be able to assess the mental health diagnosis of a child. That is why I have employed a dedicated caseworker specifically for SEND cases to support families in my area. Thank you.
Now we move on to front bench contributions. Can I call Marie Goldman from the Lib Dems?
Thank you, Sir Mark, and thank you to the Honourable Member for Lowestoft for bringing this very important debate here today. And it is my absolute pleasure to represent the Liberal Democrats in this important issue, which is filling up my inbox, as I know that it is filling up the inboxes of other Honourable Members, both here and not here and elsewhere today. I'd like to start by expanding a bit on an issue that has been raised in this debate today, but I think it needs a bit more information put out about it. And that's the issue of tribunals and what's happening with the tribunals, because we've talked a lot about parents trying to get EHCPs and how difficult it is for them to get EHCPs. But having to take your local authority to the first-tier tribunal is such an arduous task that no parent should have to go through it. But what's happening is they have to wait, on average, a year to get an appointment at a tribunal. And it's costing them tens of thousands of pounds in many instances to get to that point in the first place, where they're employing solicitors to have to battle with the local authorities to get to the point where they've given up and they have to go to tribunal. And then they wait, and they wait their year and they get their tribunal date. And then they are often faced with legally representing themselves because they've exhausted their own resources. But they're battling against local authorities that are not just using solicitors. They're not just using barristers. They're using KCs in many cases to fight against parents who are just trying to get what their children desperately need. And what's worse than that is that figure that's already come out in this debate today, but I think it's worth underlining, is despite parents not being legally represented and despite local authorities using barristers and KCs to fight parents, and what sort of system is that where that's happening? But local authorities are losing 98% of cases. So we're using public money, local authorities using public money to fight parents, and they're losing. And then we're getting to the point where a judge has then ordered, or through the first-tier tribunal, they've ordered that what's set out in the EHCP, if a parent is lucky enough to even have an EHCP at that point, and they're arguing over whether that provision is actually given, what's set out in the EHCP, in cases that I am aware of, in my own constituency of Chelmsford, and I'm sure other members are aware of in their own constituencies as well, even when that has been ordered through the tribunal, it is still not being delivered. And we have examples of parents that are having to then go to judicial review to make the local authorities do what they are legally bound to do but are not doing. We have to strengthen the consequences for local authorities who are not doing what they're supposed to be doing as set out in law, because frankly the system isn't working in that situation at the moment. And I ask the Minister to address that. But this matters, because while we're waiting for judicial review, while we're waiting for tribunals, children who are affected by this are growing up. Children have this, this uncanny knack of getting older. And as they get older, they need more resources and different resources. But I know a parent who, in my own constituency of Chelmsford, who told me, she said, "But Marie, when I went to the annual review, the officer at the council said to me, 'But every time we meet, you ask for something different.'" And she said, "Well, yes, because my child has grown up. He's now older. He needs something different than in the last review." But I think that, and as much as we may be shocked by comments like that from officers working for local councils, I think there are many, many officers who want to do the very, very best for children, but they are stuck in such awful situations where they are not provided with the resources that they need. But I wanted to talk about the fact that although a lot has been said about EHCPs, the special educational needs system is not just about EHCPs. There are about 1.6 million children with special educational needs or disabilities. Remember, we're talking about disabilities as well, not just neurological conditions. So 1.6 million people in the east of England with SEND. But only 4.8% of those, just under 48,000, have EHCPs. The rest of them have SEND, living with SEND, but don't have EHCPs. And we must make sure that we are catering for them as well. Now, I am conscious of time, so I want to make sure that I mention the funding cuts that have happened since 2010. And the School Cuts website is very instructive on this. It tells me, for example, that a high school in my constituency has received a funding cut per pupil of £1,201 since 2010. Another high school, also in my constituency, a cut of £1,174 per pupil, and it goes on and it goes on. And then we get to a special school in my constituency. Well, this takes the biscuit, I think. A £4,815 cut per pupil since 2010. So schools are having to do more with less, and we must address that. But I also want to bring out the voices of parents, because I met recently in my constituency with, I think it was 24 parents and grandparents who turned up to a meeting to tell me about the problems that they were having with the special educational needs system. And they told me many, many, many things. But they told me about things that we could do with the system that would make it better for them, that wouldn't cost the earth. And we know that there are economic challenges ahead. So let's look for solutions that don't necessarily have to focus on money. And one of the things they've really asked me for was transition. When a child is going from a primary school to a secondary school, make that transition easier for those pupils. Those pupils with SEND who need that bit of extra time to settle in, to understand what the new system is going to be like. Can we put in a better system of transition that gives them that extra time when there aren't loads of other children around? They told me about the blanket approach to attendance that many schools take. They told me about the 100% attendance awards and how cruel they are to children with special educational needs and disabilities who often have to attend medical appointments during school time and simply can never get that 100% attendance rate, and they never receive the award that they see their fellow pupils getting, and it's cruel and discriminating. They told me about schools that are locking toilet doors during class time so that children can't go to the toilet. And yet if you have a physical condition that needs you to go to the toilet, that makes it very, very difficult for you. They told me that SENCOs, in fact, one of the people who came to speak to me was indeed a SENCO. And they told me about how SENCOs aren't mandatory on the senior leadership team at schools, how they often are teaching full-time while also having to do the SENCO role. They told me that they have no protected time to look after children with special educational needs and work out what's best for them and help them. In fact, parents told me that they believe that special educational needs and SENCOs are just a name on a piece of paper for local authorities. And how does this impact children? Well, often children are demoralised when they leave school. A parent told me that for their child, all their energy was going into school, and it left nothing, no energy afterwards for anything else. One parent said, SEND shouldn't just be a bolt-on. So I echo the words of one of the previous honourable members when they say that it should be an integral part of education. I could go on and on and on about local authorities not doing their annual reviews, not replying to parents when they write to them, sending encrypted emails that disappear after 40 days, so parents have no permanent record of what they've been told. I could tell you that the evidence disappears, that they don't accept, in some cases I've been told, dyslexia as a diagnosis, as if that's not a thing. But I also just want to spend the little time that I have left just talking about a little bit more about the solutions. And I think one of the solutions that could be cost-free is being more transparent. When parents are waiting there, having applied for their EHCP that should be issued within 20 weeks, in my local authority, Essex, 1% of cases are those EHCPs being issued within 20 weeks. But when they're waiting there in week 19, waiting for that email to drop in their inbox, being anxious and stressed, and they've had to fight so hard to get to this point where they will finally be getting the provision that their children need and deserve and are, frankly, entitled to, and it doesn't arrive. That's incredibly stressful for them. And yet the local authority knows it doesn't have a chance of arriving in that time. They know that the average wait time is probably 30, 40, 50 weeks, maybe even longer in some cases. Tell parents that. Just alleviate their suffering, just a little bit. It won't fix it, but it's a free option. Local authorities already know these figures. Make them publish it. Now, in terms of funding, the Liberal Democrats want to see a centralised national body for SEND, which would end the postcode lottery of funding. And there's lots more that can be done, but there are things that we can do without having to provide funds for it. Thank you.
James Wilde.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, Mr. Efford, and I congratulate the honourable member for Lowestoft for securing such an important debate for children and parents across the east of England. And as shown again by the attendance here today, SEND provision is a priority for all of us from across the House. And since my election in 2019, I've visited over 40 of the schools in my constituency and have great admiration for all of those who are working to deliver SEND support to children there. This is a 10th debate on this topic in Parliament already this year, which just reflects the interest to constituents. The Minister is smiling. She will be having many more, I'm sure. I look forward to being here as well. And the challenges that we're facing from increasing demand, from increasing costs, and inconsistent support and outcomes. And that need for change, which we all agree on, is why I welcome the previous Conservative governments send an AP improvement plan and encourage the government to pursue those reforms, which were developed, and they took far too long to come forward, but they were developed with the sector. And parents, children, local authorities and others are looking forward to hearing, hopefully, some much-needed clarity from the government about their plans and how they will bring forward reform. And as we've heard, demand for SEND services has increased significantly, with over 1.6 million pupils having educational special needs. The Honourable Member for Chelmsford just referred to nearly 5% of pupils in England have an EHCP, with a further 1.2 million identified as having support that is below that level. And across the east of England, the prevalence of SEND varies from the lowest rates in Peterborough at 11.1% and highest in my county and county of other honourable members here today of Norfolk of 14.3%. And all local authorities have seen increases in the rates of pupils with EHCPs over the last 5 years. But the size of those increases have varied, with prevalence highest in Norfolk, Cambridgeshire and Bedfordshire. Behind all of those figures are individual children and families, and we heard a powerful speech from the Honourable Member for Thurrock, and my honourable friend from Broxbourne also referred to his own personal experience, and that underlines the need for change. So we know what the challenges are, and in my comments I just want to reflect on 3 areas where change is needed so that we can provide the right support at the right time, in the right place for every child. And firstly, we need a national framework and standards that will address the inconsistency of support. The previous Conservative government's plan set out a blueprint for a unified SEND and AP system driven by new national standards, and the first one we were due to bring forward was particularly around speech and language therapy, given the high demand that there is for that support. We also need to improve the HCP process, because we all know from constituents many parents are battling against the system, the very system that's there to support them. So we had proposals to bring forward standardised and digitised approach to that. That's much needed when less than half of EHCPs were issued within the statutory deadline of 20 weeks. And as the Honourable Member for Lowestoft said, the variation is striking. From that 90% in Bedford is only 43% in Norfolk, and far worse, as she mentioned, in Essex. So can the government confirm whether the plan is to continue with those national standards and also bring forward that standardised approach to EHCP plans and the process? The second area where we need reform is to build the capacity and expertise in mainstream schools and focus on early help. And that means improving training and skills in the SEND workforce, with a particular emphasis on early years and early intervention. And I declare an interest, as I have a number of family members who are teachers, but I think it's very important that teaching is seen as a valued profession. It's spoken as a valued profession by everyone in this House, and ongoing training in SEND and other areas is very important in that, and also in tackling the retention and recruitment problems that we have seen in recent years. Because there's much knowledge and expertise in the system, and we need to share it more effectively. Just a week ago, I was at Fen Rivers Academy in my constituency, which is a specialist SEMH therapeutic school in King's Lynn, and the head teacher there was passionate about sharing the skills that her and her staff, who've turned that school around, have between them and into mainstream settings. And that's a view that was echoed in the recent report by the County Councils Network in the LGA about better sharing of expertise and children moving between the settings. And primary SENCOs could also be better supported to help identify support for children, but that does mean they need to have access to the speech therapists and the psychologists in order to do that. So what are the government's plans for better sharing of that expertise and having more provision in the mainstream system? Obviously, mainstream won't be appropriate for everyone, and it's also important that we continue the expansion of places. The Honourable Member for Norwich North referred to new places coming on in her constituency. There are other projects, and the Honourable Member for South West Norfolk is nodding. He's got a special school coming in his constituency, and I think one in Great Yarmouth as well. So there's a lot more provision coming, and we need to continue that. And the third area is around partnership. I'd be happy to.
I thank the Honourable Member for giving way, and I mentioned my declaration as a Hertfordshire County Councillor, which I should have said earlier when I spoke, so I apologise for that. Does he agree? He makes some valid points in his speech. Does he agree with me? And I'll reiterate the point I made earlier. It shouldn't matter where you're born or where you live in the United Kingdom. Councils should receive the same level of funding to be able to provide to every child in the United Kingdom, those with additional needs with SEND, that extra funding, which will make all the difference to residents across the eastern region.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for that intervention. I do agree with him. I'm going to come on to funding very shortly, so I'll address that point then. But the third area is around partnerships and getting education and health groups working together. Currently, the system holds some bodies accountable for things they don't have responsibility for and doesn't hold other bodies accountable for things where they do have that control. So collaboration between key partners is required. And again, the last government's proposals were around creating local SEND and AP partnerships to lead change and to commission provision and to improve accountability with refocused inspections by Ofsted and the CQC. Speech and Language UK, and again the County Councils Network and LGA, have also endorsed those recommendations. So I'd be grateful if the Minister again could confirm how the government plans to pursue the partnership approach and to embed that more properly in the system. And turning to the comments of my honourable friend and other members, obviously funding has been discussed, and I think in the last debate we had here I spoke about the increases there have been in the high needs budget to £10.5 billion this year, a 60% increase from 2020. £2.6 billion was invested into new places and to improve the existing provision.
Would the Minister give way very briefly?
Briefly, yeah.
I'm very grateful. We've heard today about some of the fantastic work being done by SEND schools in all of our constituencies, and I just wonder if he believes that some form of ring-fence funding with tracked impact measures could help very good SEND schools like 5 Acre Wood in my constituency to further flourish.
Honourable friend makes an interesting point. I think we do need to track the outcomes and the support that children are getting, so that's a thoughtful comment. Interestingly, when I spoke on a panel at the Conservative Party conference in Birmingham last week, it was a representative of the Association of School and College Leaders who said, actually, there is a lot of money in the system, there's enough money in the system, but the problem is there's too much bureaucracy and it's tied up in that bureaucracy. But clearly, demand continues to rise and funding is a challenge with council expenditure tripling over the last decade. So one area where councils are looking for more clarity is around the statutory override that was put in place by the last government to help authorities deal with deficits, which I think now sit above £3 billion. And only last week in a letter to the Chancellor, the NASUWT urged the Chancellor to extend the period that local authorities have to address their SEND deficit. So perhaps, again, the Minister will be able to give a bit more clarity on this very pressing issue for local authorities. And the Honourable Member for Norfolk and Waveney referred to the pressures from school transport. In Norfolk alone, that budget is £60 million, of which 80% is used moving pupils with SEN around the county and outside of the county, which is money spent on journeys, not on education. I will briefly touch on the issue of VAT, which has been mentioned, although there is a debate going on in the main chamber on this. It's clear that this is a tax on learning that will disrupt education of children. Reference was made to pupils with EHCPs, but there are 10,000 in the east of England at independent schools with special educational needs who will be hit by these fees, whose education will be disrupted. The government has not even published an impact assessment, even though in the debate earlier the Minister referred to analysis that had been done. It's extraordinary that hasn't been shared with the House. So I hope the Minister, even at this point, will listen to parents, pupils and local authorities and others and delay those plans, and we will have an opportunity very shortly to be able to vote to do exactly that, and I look forward to doing so.
Is he suggesting that it's fair that parents who have children with a special educational need or disability should have to send their children to a private school and pay all of the fees associated with that? Is that really the best solution we can come up with?
No, is there are children in schools who are going to be hit with a very unfair tax, a 20% charge that their parents are going to have to pay, which it seems to be completely disregarded by the party opposite, which I think is disappointing to say the least. So to conclude, Mr. Efford, the last government set out a comprehensive package of reform after a lot of work with the sector, and during the debate here in September, the Minister said the Labour government are determined to fix the SEND system. Alleluia to that. So hopefully today we'll hear much more about her plans of practical action that is going to be taken rather than talking about the last 14 years. And the Minister also referred on that occasion to the importance of working together. So I will abuse my position to remind her of an invitation that has gone to her and the Education Secretary to join Norfolk MPs and Norfolk County Council who are coming to Westminster tomorrow specifically to talk about SEND, a meeting that I helped push for, and I hope that the Minister might be able to come along to that, even briefly, to hear about some of the challenges that we're facing. And ultimately, every member here wants to ensure children and families in their constituency get the support to realise their potential. I look forward to hearing the Minister's comments.
I would like to call the mover of the motion at 2 minutes to, so if you could remember that for me, you'd be doing me a big favour.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. And it's a pleasure to serve under you as Chair, Mr Efford. And I congratulate the member for Lowestoft for securing a debate on this incredibly important and incredibly timely issue, because I know she has been a champion for vulnerable young people long before entering this place, and shares this government's vision for ensuring all young people receive the right support to succeed in their education and lead healthy, happy and productive lives. And I know as well that improving the special educational needs and disability system across the country is a priority for all of you in this debate. And I'm regularly struck by the level of cross-party consensus on this issue, from Broxbourne to South End Western Lee, from Huntingdon to Stevenage, Waverley Valley. So many members have spoken powerfully today on behalf of the children and the families in their areas. And I also do appreciate the hand of collaboration offered by the Honourable Member for West Suffolk specifically, because this is a priority for this government, as the Shadow Minister referenced. And we are determined to improve services for children and young people with special educational needs across the country and in the east of England, because over 1.6 million children and young people in England have special educational needs. And we know that for too long, too many families have been let down by a system that is not working. The former Secretary of State did describe it as lose, 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 and she was right, because despite the high needs funding for children and young people with complex special educational needs and disabilities rising to higher and higher levels, confidence in the system remains incredibly low. Tribunal rates, as have been referenced by the Liberal Democrat frontbench, are increasing, and there are increasingly long waits for support. Far too many children with special educational needs are falling behind their peers, and they do not reach the expected levels in fundamental reading, writing and math skills, with just 1 in 4 pupils achieving the expected standard by the end of primary school. We know that families are struggling to get their child the support they need and, more importantly, deserve, and it must change. I give way.
Quite answer my question on this, and I would just love to hear the Minister's response, bearing in mind what she's saying about the need and the work of special schools. Does she believe that ring-fencing of funding for SEND schools with tracked impact measures could help some of these amazing schools that are going well beyond the pale, helping children who are highly vulnerable with their education and care, and supporting their families to further flourish?
I'll take away the Honourable Lady's suggestion. I think what I want to set out today is how we want to improve the whole system, our whole education system, to serve children in the best way possible, regardless of their needs, and especially given the subject of this debate, those with special educational needs and disabilities. And we want to reform the system to achieve that across the board. And we know that for many years, parents have been frustrated, but we are determined to fix it, and I will repeat that and reiterate it. But it does start with being honest with families about the challenges that there are in the system. We urgently need to improve inclusivity and expertise in mainstream schools, and we do need to make sure there are special schools that can cater for those with complex needs. We are determined to restore parents' trust that their child will get the support they need to flourish, no matter their additional need or disability. And the Honourable Member for Thurrock spoke powerfully about these issues in her speech. We know that effective early identification and intervention is key to reducing the impact of a special educational need or disability that they might have in the long term. And that's why we announced the extra funding for the extended funding for the Nuffield Early Language Intervention to continue it into next year, to make sure that children get that extra support they need to find their voice and to give them that best start to their education. But there are no quick fixes for these deep-rooted issues. After 14 years, we know the system is really struggling. It's in desperate need of reform, and it is vital that we fix it. And that is why we have started this work already, because it is a priority for us, but it will take time. And we're very clear that we cannot do this alone. And that's why we will work with the sector as essential and valued partners to ensure our approach is fully planned and delivered together with parents, with schools, with councils, with the expert staff that we know go above and beyond every day to look after children in their care. And we're acting as quickly as we can to respond to the urgent cost pressures in the SEND system, which we know are causing real financial problems across the east of England and nationally, and many honourable members have referenced them today. Before the parliamentary recess, we announced the new Core Schools Budget Grant, which will provide special and alternative provision schools with an extra £140 million of funding this financial year, and 13.6 million of that has been allocated to local authorities in the East of England region, and that's in addition to the high needs funding allocations for children and young people with complex special educational needs and disabilities, and the existing teachers' pay and pensions grants. But the Department for Education's budgets for the next financial year have not yet been decided. How much high needs funding is distributed to local authority schools and colleges will depend on the government spending review, which is due to be announced at the end of this month. And that means that next year's high allocation funding to local authorities hasn't been published to the normal timescales, but we are working across government to announce next year's allocations for local authorities as soon as we can. And I take on board the Shadow Minister's comments in that regard. And because resolving these problems with the SEND system, I've repeated this, but I will repeat it again, it won't be easy and it won't be quick. And it won't happen as quickly as we, or I know families who need it, want it to happen. But I am keen that we do deliver long-term solutions together. And I'm very grateful for the contributions from across the House today on these very important issues, because I know we all want the same thing. As well as making sure we have better outcomes from the investment that is made in young people, it's important that there is a fair education funding system, and it does direct funding to where it is needed. And I know this is an issue raised by the Right Honourable Member for Mid-Norfolk, and we want to make sure that it is a fair funding system that does allocate funding in the fairest and most appropriate way possible. But it will take time to look at that formula, and we will look very carefully at any impacts of any changes on local authorities. Ofsted and the Care Quality Commission jointly inspect local area sender provision, and to ensure that there is joined-up support for children and young people. These inspections enable the Department of Education to intervene in cases of significant concern, to work with local authorities and professional advisors to address areas of weakness. And as raised by the Honourable Member for Ipswich today, I too am concerned that the SEND inspections in Central Bedfordshire and Peterborough in 2019 and in Hertfordshire and Suffolk in 2023 found significant concerns about the experiences and outcomes of children with SEND. The issues raised in these inspection reports are serious. The government needs to be confident that the right actions to secure sustainable and rapid improvement are being taken in these areas. And notable also is the 2023 inspection for Southend-on-Sea. While not being found to have serious concerns, the partnership's inconsistent experiences and outcomes for children and young people judgment by Ofsted and the CQC highlights the need to work closely with local area partnerships to support and help drive crucial improvements. And it's essential that rapid action is taken to improve SEND services in areas where it is not meeting the need, and leaders accept collective responsibility and accountability for delivering on agreed actions. And it will require a relentless focus on improvement across all service providers so that children, young people and families are able to access the support they need. So the Department for Education officials will continue to work closely with these local areas over the coming months to ensure that the necessary progress is being made. These local area partnerships who have yet to be inspected under the new framework, they also continue to meet with SEND leads to keep abreast of emerging issues and concerns as well as gathering evidence of good practice, because there are areas that are doing this well and can share that with other local authorities and other regions and nationally. With regard to specialist place sufficiency that has been raised by a number of members, in particularly the member for Norwich North, local authorities can use their high needs capital funding to deliver new places in mainstream and special schools, as well as other specialist settings. It can also be used to improve the suitability and accessibility of existing buildings. Suffolk, for example, has been allocated £23 million in high needs funding between 2022 and 25, capital funding specifically. The East of England region as a whole received £236 million. And as referenced by the Honourable Member for North West Cambridgeshire, in addition to specialist places, it is right that this government is committed to working with councils, school leaders and other sector partners nationally and in the East of England to develop a more inclusive education system within mainstream settings. To ensure high and rising standards that we want to see in our schools, we have to deliver the right places in the right time in the right sufficiency. I know honourable members have raised the issue of exclusions, but I'm very conscious of time, but I take on board the concerns, and there is a framework in place that must be followed to ensure that these decisions are made correctly. But in concluding, I want to thank my honourable friend again for bringing these matters forward. We recognise the SEND system needs to improve. We acknowledge the difficulties too often faced in securing the right support for children with SEND. I am determined that this will change. And my final word must go to all those working across education, health and care in the interests of our children and young people with special educational needs, both in the East of England and across the country, because together we will deliver the best for all our children and young people, no matter their special educational needs or disabilities.
Thank you, Chair, and to the Minister, Shadow Minister, and all my honourable colleagues for your contributions. I can't do justice in such a short time, but this is an issue which I hope will continue to command cross-party and cross-regional support. I just wanted to talk about the so-called over-energetic child who faces exclusion for consistent poor behaviour. I want to see that child get the access to the diagnosis and support that they need to stay in school and flourish. And to support our struggling families. As one mum told me, I didn't want to have to become a lawyer. I just wanted to be a loving mum. Thank you very much for the debate today.
The question is that the House has considered SEND provision in East of England. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order, order. We will just suspend the sitting for a few seconds whilst a large number of members that are present leave. If you could do so quickly and quietly, we can then move on to the next business. Thank you, Minister. We have the mover. We can leave quietly, please. Quietly. Call Victoria Collins to move the motion, and we'll then call the Minister to respond. There will not be an opportunity for the member in charge to wind up, as is the convention, for 30-minute debates. Order, order. Victoria Collins to move the motion.
I beg to move that the House has considered tackling sewage discharge in chalk streams. One Friday evening, I got a text and photos from a desperate resident, Maz, as the numbers cranked up on the sewage discharge map. Surely something can be done about our precious chalk stream. I'd been following the situation, but as soon as I saw the photos of sewage-filled water flooding the roads, I called her straight away. I'm coming down, can you meet me there? 20 minutes later, and my Friday evening started by checking sewage, seeing trails of toilet paper and algae float by the side of the road next to one of the world's rare chalk streams. The River Vere, one of the 4 chalk streams in Harpenden and Berkhamsted, had seen over 1,000 hours of pollution through the sewage discharge overflow. To date, that has reached over 2,500 hours. This is just not good enough. Chalk streams, long described as England's rainforest, provide a unique environment. The stable temperature from running through chalk, combined with a high mineral content, means that chalk streams are the ideal environment for vegetation to grow and wildlife to flourish. As havens for the natural environment, chalk streams attract a diverse array of flora and fauna, from the green drake mayfly to the kingfisher, the brown trout to the endangered water vole. These precious rivers offer a home to a whole host of wildlife. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, can I commend the Honourable Lady for bringing this forward? We're very fortunate, or unfortunate perhaps, not to have chalk streams in Northern Ireland, but what we do have is limestone rivers, which are very equal in the aqualife that they have and also the health of the land. Does the Honourable Lady agree, when it comes to ensuring that aqualife and the environment is restrained, we need to have a short-term action, but we also need a long-term protection as well?
Absolutely. And to English chalk streams, the downland the English chalk downland houses 85% of the total in the whole world. It is a privilege to say that in my constituency of Harpenden and Berkhamsted, we're home to 4 of those rare and precious habitats: the River Bulbourne, the River Gade, the River Lee and the River Vere. Yes, I will give way. Can I also thank the Honourable Member for giving way and for securing a debate on this crucial issue. My constituency of Reading West and Mid-Berkshire also boasts several beautiful chalk streams, and the Pang is one of these. It's said to have inspired the wind in the willows. And I recently tested the water quality there and with campaigners from the Angling Trust, and found phosphate levels 3 times what they should be. And Chair, you wouldn't find ratty or mole there anymore, really sadly, because it's a really dangerous level of phosphate. So does the Honourable Lady agree with me? Sorry, was that too long, Chair? I apologise. So does the Honourable Lady agree with me that the previous government has let our chalk streams down when they abandoned their chalk stream plan? And will she join me in calling for urgent action to protect our chalk streams? Thank you. Absolutely, we have been let down by the last Conservative government, and we need to turn that around. And these chalk streams and their catchment areas, such as the one in Harpenden and Berkhamsted, have been a lifeline around which our towns and villages have flourished, using the chalk streams to power thriving mill communities and supply the watercress industry. Still today, chalk streams form an important part of everyday life. Batford Springs and Redbourne Mill are prime locations for families to paddle and play, especially on warm, sunny days. These precious habitats, however, are under continued threat from pollution, from road runoff to sewage. Not one is in good overall river health. I'll give...
Thank you. Thank you very much. Is this on? Yep. I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady for giving way, and to Lee. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for securing this very, very important debate. My constituency of Wokingham is blessed with the River Loddon flowing through its boundaries. It is a rich, biodiverse environment, a reminder of the beauty in our natural world. And yet the scourge of sewage discharges persists. Thames Water must make the necessary infrastructure investments to halt their appalling record. But the company's future is far, far from certain. Those plans may be undermined. Yep. Does my honourable friend agree that the government must ensure these investments proceed, no matter the financial position of Thames Water?
Absolutely, these are vital investments that have to go ahead. And locally, bring it back to, we've got many organisations who have worked for many years to highlight the importance of precious catchment areas and work tirelessly to protect them. From the Chiltern Society, Vere Valley Society, the Chiltern Chalk Stream Project, the River Colne Catchment Action Network, Herts and Middlesex Wildlife Trust, to local volunteers at Batford Springs, or Friends of the Bulbourne and the Not Born Yesterday project. Many... I will give way.
Thank you for giving way. I'm absolutely grateful, and thank you. Well done on securing the debate today. So in Epsom Mule, we have 2 chalk streams, and it's really important, not only in terms of ecology, but also for its cultural heritage. So the Hogsmill River is a chalk stream so serene that it provided the perfect setting for John Millay's painting Ophelia. Knowing the ecological and cultural significance of Hogsmill, it's been really sad to see its worsening water quality due to pollution. In September alone, sewage overflowed into Hogsmill for over 30 years. Does the honourable member agree that our chalk streams, including the Hogsmill, are not just local treasures, they are part of our national heritage, and swift action is needed to protect them against degradation from sewage discharges?
Absolutely. And many of my local constituents are horrified at the local state of rivers, frustrated by the lack of progress, and feel compelled to attend the March for Clean Water on Sunday, November the 3rd. Sewage pumping in our rivers is both hugely damaging for the local environment, contaminating the water with unacceptably high levels of phosphate and nitrates, but also poses a major health risk.
Would my honourable friend give way?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for securing this debate. Would my honourable friend agree with me and with the Action for the River Kennet that the requirement for sewage treatment works shouldn't just be based on the population size that it supports, but also the importance of the waterways it protects, such as the Lambourne and the Kennet chalk streams that flow through my constituency of Newbury?
Thank you. Absolutely, we've got to do all that we can. After the thousands of hours of pollution into the River Vere, the Vere Valley Society found worrying levels of E. coli in the water. Where this has been blamed on high groundwater levels, this still contains sewage and the fine sediment can lay in the riverbed. Having raised the incident with Thames Water, their planned scheme to resolve this issue won't be complete until 2026. We need action sooner. In the meantime, the rapid polluting of this waterway and the threat to public health and local environment continues. This is, of course, by no means an isolated incident.
Yes. I thank the Honourable Lady for bringing forward this important debate. My constituency of Eastleigh has the precious chalk stream, the River Itchen, running through it. And earlier this year, Southern Water were found negligible by the Southampton Magistrates Court for dumping sewage into the Shorefoot Lake stream, which flowed into YMCA's Fairthorne Manor in Fair Oak in my constituency, and over 1,000 school children missed out on summer activities as a result. Does the Honourable Lady agree with me that the government should introduce a sewage tax on water company profits?
There's absolutely a lot that I'll be calling for in terms of holding water companies to account. After, where are we? We had analysis completed by the Liberal Democrats which found that almost 50,000 hours of sewage was discharged into chalk streams in 2023. That's more than double the previous year. And the dire situation speaks to the 2022 report, which found that only 14% of England's rivers had good ecological status, compared to several other countries like Austria, Greece and Malta, where 95% of bathing sites are classified as excellent. It's clear that we are letting down our rivers and streams, and this must change. And despite this situation, the Conservatives stood by and let us down again and again, failing to regulate water companies properly. So I call on the Minister for proper protection, regulation and enforcement. Although Ofwat has finally taken action, ordering water companies to return £158 million to customers via lower bills, this is just a drop in the ocean, or should I say, a drop in the chalk stream. We must go further. I'm calling on the Minister for a blue flag status to protect our precious waterways, such as chalk streams, to replace Ofwat with a stronger regulator, the Clean Water Authority, and calling for the Minister to enforce tougher restrictions on water companies. A blue flag status for rivers and lakes would enshrine their protection. Our precious chalk streams would be ripe contenders to get such a status. Indeed, given their rarity in this world, it's worrying to know that only a dozen have SSSI status, which currently protects them. Yes.
Given that you have to go through quite an onerous process to get the SSI status, given that we recognise that chalk streams are rare, they're rare, does the Honourable Lady agree with me that what is needed is a recognised special status, a special designation for chalk streams so they can get the protections that they actually need?
Absolutely. As my right honourable friend says, they're extremely rare, 200, almost 200 in the world, not many at all. As for regulating our water, Ofwat is simply not fit for purpose, and we ask the Minister to replace it with a new Clean Water Authority that takes relevant powers from the Environment Agency. We ask to strengthen the regulatory powers and resources and set legally binding targets to prevent sewage discharge in our highly sensitive nature sites. This Clean Water Authority should have the power to revoke the licence of poorly performing water companies swiftly, fine top executives of water companies and initiate prosecutions, increase water monitoring with new sewage inspectors, including unannounced inspections with the aim of ending water companies' self-monitoring. When it comes to water companies, we must hold them to account and reform the way they work. We must ask for meaningful targets and deadlines to be set for water companies to end sewage discharges with local environmental experts on water company boards. Water companies should publish 25-year investment plans to encourage sound investment and promote the use of nature-based solutions. We must... Yes, I'll give that.
So my constituency suffered quite considerably from flooding in the past month. And one of the reasons for that is that chalk streams can be over-engineered, culverted, and canalised through villages. Nature-based solutions offer a really good solution to improve the flow of rivers. Does my honourable lady agree with me on that point?
Absolutely. We must also see a ban on water bonuses and on bonuses for water company executives until sewage spills end and leaks are fixed. And ultimately, we need to transform the transformation of water companies into public benefit companies. Our precious chalk streams are a rare global ecological importance and the backdrop to our towns, villages and daily lives. We must protect them for our future generations and for today's generation. We cannot squander the opportunity to protect them under our watch. Thank you very much.
Oh, sorry, beg your pardon. Before I call the Minister, the question is that the House has considered the matter of tackling sewage discharges in chalk streams. Now call the Minister.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Efford. It is a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and I'm grateful to be part of this debate, so thank you to the Honourable Member for securing it. And is this the first debate the Honourable Member's secured in the House? I'm very pleased it's one of your first debates then to be had on such an important issue. Now, I don't want to go into a competition over who has the best chalk stream box, but I happen to mention that the one near to where I live was featured in Mortimer and Whitehouse Gone Fishing just the other day, and it was a Driffield Beck. So we got to see not only sharing stories here about who has the most beautiful chalk stream, but we got to see this on national television as well. And I share the honourable member's love of it. England's equivalent of the Great Barrier Reef. I mean, what an amazing thing to have, and to say that these are actually held within our own country and something so precious to one of us. The rarest freshwater habitats on earth in England, and we're home to 85% of them. I mean, that's a remarkable achievement. And she is absolutely right, can I say, to feel outraged, absolutely right, to feel outraged and upset about the levels of river pollution. I'm sure there are more enjoyable things she'd want to do on a Friday night than go and examine a sewage discharge into the water. But it's very good that she was there and able to document it, because where we have the evidence of illegal sewage discharges, and of course we wish to prosecute. Of course.
You mentioned in your opening remarks about the fishing programme. And yes. I wonder if you would support an 8-metre buffer zone around rivers to stop the runoff of topsoil into chalk streams, which stops wild brown trout, for example, from being able to spawn.
Yeah, and I will move on as I go on to the speech to talk a little bit about runoff and some of the other issues involved. But I also would like to join the Honourable Lady in praising her local community groups and organisations. One of the pleasures I've had since taking on this brief is meeting so many committed environmentalists and ENGOs and people who care so much about the area. And I liked this tale of the people going and picnicking by the edge of her chalk stream. I'm kind of tempted now to see whether I need to go visit this when I'm next on holiday. But she's right also to point out that England's chalk streams face pressure on their water quality, and pollution are coming from different point sources, as she's already mentioned, especially sewage treatment works, which she discovered on that Friday evening, but also diffuse sources like phosphorus and road runoff as well. I mean that chalk streams suffer from higher levels of nutrient, sediment and toxic chemicals such as pesticides as well. And I'll go on to explain some of the actions the government are taking in regards to address these concerns. However, as has been mentioned, and forgive me for not getting the honourable gentleman's name, it's not just water quality alone that affects the chalk streams that flow in the honourable member's constituency. They face pressures affecting the quantity and physical habitat quality too. For the water quantity, we've seen excessive removal of water from its original source, which can lower the natural river flow of these streams. This causes a reduction. Of course.
For giving way. In the Chichester constituency, we have two crucial chalk streams, the River Ems and the River Lavant, and Portsmouth Water have been abstracting from the River Ems since the 1960s, which has actually moved the flow 2 kilometres downstream at the point of flow. Does the Minister agree with me that water companies that rely on our chalk streams to supplement their water supply need to come up with some sustainable water solutions to ensure our water supply for the future?
Order, order. There's a division in the House, so we have to suspend the sit-in for
15 minutes.
15 minutes.